amount of thin set they're using on the notches is going to be much. You're not leaving spaces in when you're. Okay, so it may seem that a trowel is a simple thing to use. And relatively it is. But I see a lot of people having trouble with it. They don't know what angle to hold it at. They really don't know what a trowel is. So here, I've got a trowel right here. This is just a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch notch trowel. So it's the how far, how wide the notch is, how tall the tooth is, and how wide the tooth is. So that's a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. So in other words, this is a 1/4, this is a 1/4, and this is a 1/4. So might seem pretty simple. I've done several videos where I show how to pick a trowel. In this video, I just want to specifically talk about the trowel. But before we go there, just in case you've never seen my videos, I've been installing tile for 35 years. My channel has over 800 videos, and they're pretty much all to do with tile. So check those out, and you can get an idea of whether or not I know what I'm talking about. So anyway, so the trowel has more than one surface. As you can see, it has teeth on this side, has teeth on this side, has a flat side, and has a flat side. If you've never used a flat side, then you're not using your trowel properly. The trowel that is actually designed to work at a specific angle. So if you're going straight up and down like this, let me see, like that, then you're probably using it wrong. If you're going way down like this, you're probably using it wrong. The actual angle that the trowel is designed to work on is at about a 45-degree angle. And that actually does make a difference, because depending on, and you're supposed to keep the trowel, as you're going along, you're supposed to keep it at a consistent height. You don't want to go like start off like this, and then as you're going down, flatten it out, because the amount of thin set that you leave on the substrate that you're using will change depending on the angle of the trowel. If you're using a very flat, then the amount of thin set they're using on the notches is going to be much smaller than the amount of thin set if you were using it like this. I know this seems like simple stuff, but I see people all the time online using it wrong. When you're spreading your thin set, you also want to make sure that you're leaving full lines. You're not leaving spaces in when you go across and the thin set is coming out from, you've got your thin set on this side, and you've got a bunch of thin set, you've got like a mound of thin set on this side, and you're pulling across and you're leaving your lines on the back. You want to make sure that the lines that you're leaving are full, that there's no voids in those lines. So depending on the type of tile you're going to use, you're going to pick out a trowel. So what is a trowel? So we got this kind of trowel. This is another kind of trowel. This one here is what they call a Euro trowel. And trowels, the purpose of the trowel is to gauge out the amount of thin set appropriate for your tile. So let's say you've got a very small tile, like a mosaic tile. You don't want to be using a trowel like this to set your mosaic tile. And I'm not going to go into how to actually choose a tile. I just want to get through the basics here. So the bigger the tile, the bigger the trowel. So for a mosaic tile, you're not going to use something like this. You're probably going to use something more like this, or maybe even like this. This is a slightly bigger trowel. Or if it's a thick mosaic, you might use something like this. They even make, I have one in the truck, which is a 3/4 inch U-notch. This is a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square notch. So there's all different types of sizes and configurations. And the reason for these configurations is to meter out the correct amount of thinset for the tile you're installing. Like I said, if you're using a mosaic tile, you don't want to use a really big trowel, but in some cases you can use a bigger trowel. In some cases, you're going to use your notch trowel and you're going to flatten the ridges. I have videos all about that. So, as I was saying, a trowel is a gauge. It meters out the correct amount of thinset. So all these configurations of all these trowels, they have, this is a 1/2 inch square notch, and they have the Euro trowel, then they have other kinds of trowels which like weird looking teeth. It's all about putting the correct amount of thinset on the substrate so that when you set your tile, you're going to get the proper coverage to hold that tile in place forever. So if you don't get the correct coverage, you could have problems. So all these configurations of these trowels are specifically to get the correct amount of trowel, of thinset on your substrate. Now, we're not talking about backbone or anything like that. We're just talking about the trowel. So if you use this trowel and you're spreading your thinset, you want to keep the angle that you're spreading your thinset consistent. As I was saying, you don't want to start off high and then end up low. You want to always keep it more or less on the same consistent, same level. And the bottom of the teeth need to scrape along the bottom of on the surface of the substrate. You don't want to meter your gauge by not just lifting it and trying to get the correct amount of thinset by keeping it a bit higher. If you don't have enough thinset with a small notch, you need to move up to a bigger notch. Trying to gauge it out by eye does not work. You won't get the correct amount of thinset. So the teeth of the trowel need to be in contact with the substrate so that when you come across and you're leaving the thinset behind the teeth and you're getting those notches of thinset on your substrate, they're all going to be exactly the same. Because if they're not exactly the same, what happens is when you set the tile, one side might be a tiny bit higher than the other side, and it makes it a lot more difficult to set the tile and have and keep the lippage down. It's just, if you've got thicker thinset on one side than you do on the other side, and you put your tile down and you move it in, it's going to be harder to keep that tile flat because your thinset is not flat. And that also goes to the substrate below. So a trowel, as I was saying, has 4 sides. It has the tooth side, has a flat side on both ends. This side, the flat side, should be used almost as much as the notch side. I'll link to a video that shows the difference between when you key in a substrate and you don't key in a substrate, and you'll be amazed at the difference. If you haven't seen that video, you'll be amazed at what the difference is. And you could say, well, when you're spreading your thinset, that the teeth come in contact with the substrate, and then that's keying it in. To a certain extent, yes, but the difference between actually using a flat side and keying, forcing that thinset into the substrate, there is a substantial difference in bond. It's been tested, it's been proven, so you might want to make sure you do that. So when you're spreading your thinset, you want to always use the flat side, and then you gauge the thinset out with the notch side. So just to recap, A trowel, the size of the trowel is important, so you need to pick the correct size notch for the tile you're installing. It could be a square notch, it could be a Euro notch, it could be some other configuration, it could be a U notch. There are different types of trowels, but they all do the same thing. They gauge out, meter out the correct amount of thinset on for your substrate so that you can set the tile on and get correct coverage. Very important. So a trowel is a gauge to meter out the correct amount of thinset on your substrate, and you use it at the correct angle or a consistent angle. If you're going to use it at a low angle because you want to use you don't have the right size trowel and you want to use less thinset on the substrate, you can do that, but you always have to keep that angle consistent. You can't start out like this and then move down like that. You have to always keep the angle consistent to have the same amount of thinset across your substrate. Okay, so I hope you found this video helpful. As I said before, I've been installing tile for over 35 years. My channel has over 800 videos, pretty much all to do with tile, so check that out. Also, if you can check me out on Patreon and support me there, that'd be great. I'll leave some links in the description to some other videos and some useful stuff on Amazon. So check those out, and most important of all, don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments in the comment section. Thanks for watching.